This story starts from Ilan Shor, a politician leading the homonymous party Shor, that at the last parliamentary elections here in the Republic of Moldova has gained 9 seats. When I was covering the presidential elections, I had been intrigued by this party and its presidential candidate, Violeta Ivanov, which strangely was the candidate to the post, but not the lead of the party. Why? I'll answer this question with a funny fact. During the campaign, Ivanov had to shoot a presidential spot relying on a green screen to fake a dialogue with the lead of the party, Ilan Shor. The dialogue is fake because Shor is not in the country. In fact, he cannot even come back to Moldova. He would be arrested for his involvement in a bank fraud. As a matter of fact, he was convicted along with the lead of Moldincombank, Vyacheslav Platon, for the disappearance of $1 billion from Banca de Economii, at the time chaired by Shor, and which subsequently went bankrupt, Unibank and Banca Socială. Platon himself was found guilty of embezzling some of the money that disappeared, around 800 million lei, which roughly translates into $42 million. Platon always declared his innocence, but since 2016 he has been detained. At the moment he is out of prison and we crossed paths the other day at a restaurant here in Chisinau. He may be a convicted fellow, but he has certainly great taste, gastronomically speaking of course. Shor was also sentenced to house arrest in 2015, but in the same year he ran to become the mayor of Orhei, and he won. The corporate investigation firm Kroll stated in its report to the National Bank of Moldova that Shor was one of, if not the only, beneficiary of the billion-dollar theft. However, given the immense amount of the fraud, roughly 13% of the GDP of the country, Shor could have not committed it without the protection of the supervisory and prosecution authorities subordinated to the political elite. The fraud took place in the same years of the so-called Russian Landromat, and the embezzled $1 billion reached Moldova through this scheme that I'm about to present. Most likely, the origin of the money was illegal, and the intent of the Landromat was to launder sums that otherwise could not be spent. Sending the money to Moldova was a first step to transition it to European banks, and from there in legal circulation. Transparency International wrote in its report, "The laundered Russian money may have come from unsecured bank loans, fictitious acquisitions related to government contracts, misappropriation of funds from the Russian treasury, tax evasion and smuggling. In order to move the funds out of Russia, the perpetrators opened at least 21 shell companies incorporated in the UK, Cyprus and New Zealand. The scheme worked as follows. Shell Company A issued a promissory note to Shell Company B without transferring any real money. The note was endorsed by the Russian companies who intend to launder the funds, creating thus a fake debt. The same note was also endorsed by a Moldovan citizen whose identity had been stolen by the perpetrators. The organizers claimed the fake debt repayments in Moldovan courts. Since the debt was not contested by any of the parties, the court rulings were extremely fast. Based on these court rulings, the Russian companies moved the money to Moldovan banks into the account of a judicial executor appointed by the Moldovan court. Subsequently, the largest share of the laundered funds was further transferred to the Latvian Trasta Commerzbanka inside the EU. Among the beneficiaries that facilitated the transitioning of money from Russia to Moldova, there are Alexei Krapivin, Alexander Grigoriev, arrested in 2015, and Igor Putin, the cousin of the Russian president, which was both the member of the supervisory board of RSB and board member of Promsberbank. Still, the sums we're talking about are far superior to the $1 billion for which Platon and Shor are tried. Statistical reports highlighted that cash inflows originating from the Community of Independent States into Moldovan banks between 2010 and 2014 amounted to $80 billion and significantly exceeded financial flows from real economic activities. It has been estimated that the total inflow related to suspicious activities is 71 billion, 10 times the annual GDP of Moldova in 2014. How could this happen? The former governor of the National Bank of Moldova, Dorin Dragutanu, stated that Moldincombank reported all these transactions from 2010 to 2014, and therefore supervisory authorities were aware of the ongoing money laundering activities from the very beginning. Nevertheless, the fake court rulings were questioned only in May 2014, when the scheme was about to end. And this happened only after the release of the first investigative article describing the proportions of the Russian laundromat. Even after that, no measures were taken regarding the judges and the judicial executors involved in the money laundering. According to Transparency International, this well-coordinated activity could have not taken place without the political protection of the ruling parties. The pro-European coalition that governed the country between 2010 and 2014 had signed a coalition agreement in the December of 2010, and according to a secret annex, the members of the coalition shared control over the independent supervisory and prosecution institutions. The Democratic Party, controlled by Vladimir Plahotniuc, obtained the control over the National Anti-Corruption Center and the General Prosecutor's Office, as well as the National Bank of Moldova. Dorin Dragutanu, the former governor, and his subordinates were close to Plahotniuc. Furthermore, in 2010 and 2011, the Parliament and the Constitutional Court approved pieces of legislation to change the legal framework to facilitate money laundering schemes. For example, in May 2010, the Parliament approved the cancellation of the 3% tax for the examination of debt recovery claims. Another bill proposed in June 2010 by the Democratic Party MP Valeriu Guma, but approved in 2011, was meant to modify the anti-money laundering law, allowing the courts to suspend the decisions destined to block suspicious transactions. You see, the scandal is political. It is true that Ilan Shor and Vyacheslav Platon are being tried for the embezzlement of money connected to the scheme. It is true that after the change of government in 2019 and the rise of the Party of Action of Solidarity of Maia Sandu, Shor and Plahotniuc left the country, but today no one has been tried for the Russian laundromat.